Well, fantastic. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be here, Bryce and Iasa. This is I think it's the third or fourth time I've had the privilege to come and talk at one of these events of yours, and I found them to be just absolutely fascinating. And the 24 hours to business architecture. It feels like we're coming of age when suddenly somebody gives us that sort of a stage to present as a community to the world. So really a great event, and I'm so pleased to have been invited. Capsifi, who are we? What are we doing? And why are we here? We're an Australian-based software company. We have a platform for business architecture. We call it a digital business platform, actually. And really what it does is it encapsulates the entire concept of a business operating model into an enduring interactive platform that gives business people and architects access to very interactive canvases that explain how a business functions. So we're trying to really, I guess, our whole approach is to try to bring and make architecture accessible to stakeholders outside of IT. That's really what our business is about. But I'm not going to be talking about our tool today. I'm actually I'll be talking about the concept of transformation, and in particular, how we can ensure that transformation initiatives actually deliver on the value that stakeholders are looking for from them. Actually, you're probably all familiar with these doom and gloom statistics about how much organizations actually struggle with their transformation initiatives. For the most part, it always feels that every measure that anybody takes is that people are not actually getting the value that they set out to with their transformation initiatives. And there might be all kinds of explanations for that. We've thought long and hard about how we can contribute better to better outcomes in transformation initiatives. And our thinking is that one of the key drivers for this challenge that organizations face is the actual complexity of making the right decisions about what to transform. When you think of the complexity of most global organizations, there are so many moving parts. Knowledge is so fragmented that it makes decision-making extremely myopic without the holistic understanding of all of the root causes, the traceability and alignment between all of the dependencies that you have in a complex system of an ecosystem of an organization. And that means that without something like a business architecture driven model that you can go to underpin your decision making, really a lot of these transformation initiatives are doomed right from the start, because we just can't really understand where the pain points are, where the backlog, the bottlenecks are, what the priorities should be to transform. And for the most part, we'd be shooting from the hip and without much intelligence when we get started. So how do you then address that problem? How do you get a focus on the value that you're trying to achieve with your transformation, who the value stakeholders are, and then how do you embed value all the way through the transformation plan and execution? That's exactly what I'm going to try and talk about today. And as Lewis Carroll tells us with the Cheshire Cat, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And oftentimes it just feels that if as long as we're doing something that sort of satisfies our need and we're ticking boxes on our project plan, that's often how we measure our progress. And we get to the end and we go, oh, did we actually achieve anything? Often not. So how do we make sure then that we know what we're doing with our transformation and with innovation in general, and the whole topic that we've just been through earlier with design thinking and business model canvas is all about innovating your business model. We started with this concept of innovation. We thought, how can we unpack and explain what innovation is actually about? In other words, what would be the anatomy of innovation? What possibly sounds like an odd question. The reason for coming at it from this angle is we're an ontology-based tool. Our product is a knowledge graph. So we're really all about understanding how knowledge connects and how all of the concepts within an organization make sense. And so when we take an abstract concept like innovation, it's really hard to get underneath the core of it and to figure out how it actually works and how can you apply innovation effectively in your organization. So here's how we've approached it. When you innovate, there are two possible things that you can innovate. You can either innovate what you're offering to your customers, or you can innovate how you deliver those offerings. If you're innovating your offering, it's generally a product-led innovation. And if you're innovating your delivery of your offerings, it's a capability-driven innovation. And this is actually something that quite often gets missed, because we always tend to think, and we've been influenced so heavily by organizations like the Spotify product-centric view of the world, SAFe with their view of products and features and user stories. And when business architects come along and they've got their vocabularies which don't quite fit this, we often think, this is actually, we've got to try and shoehorn somehow business architecture into this product-centric view of the world. But in fact, they're just two completely aligned but parallel approaches. It's just, it all just comes back down to what is the thing that's being innovated. And so the parallel alignment here is when we're innovating capabilities, instead of looking at a feature or enhancement to a product, what we're looking at is a business outcome or put it another way, perhaps an uplift to the capability. And it all just comes down to the same set of requirements or user stories at the very end that address those uplifts or those enhancements. And when we get that perspective, then we can suddenly see, we can still use the exact same agile methodology, the same backlog. We're pushing our user stories and our epics into the backlog. All works very well. In fact, then, let's try and unpack a little bit further. So when we're talking about the product, what are we actually innovating in the product? Well, actually, it's not really the product, but it's the value proposition of the product. And there are multiple dimensions to that. The product itself and its features is certainly one important thing, but there's so much else that we could be innovating. The way in which we promote it, the pricing and so on, and how we price it, and the whole concept of product-driven growth today, which is very important in the software industry. We can go from freemium products and use embedded drivers within the product and the software itself to continually uplift and upsell your customers into the product. And even the place, which for digital transformation is often the big thing that's changing, moving from a physical retail store to an online digital market, for example. So when you're thinking of your enhancements, it could be across any of these things, or perhaps a combination of all of them. Similarly, capabilities, abstract thing. How do you actually uplift the capability? What does it actually mean to uplift the capability? Well, the capability is made up of the 4 dimensions, as we all know: people, process, information, and technology. And the uplift then is on one of these dimensions, or possibly more. Maybe it's a technology upgrade, maybe it's a change to a process, or maybe you're moving and reorganizing the very important people side of things, for example. We like to then break this down into two perspectives. This here is actually the hardest part, the scoping of transformation. We, as an industry, we become pretty good here at delivery. This is what agile methods, sprints, and SAFe and scaled agile, they're all focused on making sure that the delivery happens well, and we've become really good at that. What we're not always very good at, though, is feeding that machine. Getting that mythical backlog fed with the right stuff. And this is where business architects play such an important role, is in exactly this column here, identifying the opportunities for enhancement across the value proposition, or identifying the uplifts across the capabilities and the value streams, as you'll see in a second. But then how you actually come up with this scope is exactly the same mechanism. Once again, somebody identifies a pain or an opportunity, and bingo, they have an idea. It could be an idea for a product feature, it could be an idea for an operational enhancement. And once that idea gets formed, we just capture it and we manage it through its life cycle of stages, conceiving, prioritizing, designing, perhaps building a business case, scheduling, and getting it into the backlog for change. So in fact, they're completely complementary. They're not mutually exclusive. And in fact, many transformations might be going down a combination of these paths. So really great way of just conceptualizing right from the beginning what it is that you're transforming. And once you've got that clear, then you're halfway there to being able to then manage the value through the initiative. Where next? Well, there's a whole sequence now of where value plays across the rest of the initiative. And it starts really by thinking about who are the stakeholders, who would be people who are actually going to get value out of this transformation initiative. So beginning with then, we call them the value dimensions, and I'll talk about that in a second. So defining the value dimensions and what value means to the different stakeholders. Aligning then those dimensions into the enterprise value map. In other words, constructing a map that defines precisely what does value actually mean to your organization and to these various stakeholders to whom you're going to be delivering the value. Understanding and designing then your value propositions, as we just talked about, planning the value delivery through those business capabilities, the value streams and the customer, which underpin the customer journeys. We'll go into that. And then finally, very importantly, tracking the realization of your value as it unfolds across the transformation journey. So here's then a little bit of further unpacking then of those 5 steps. When we're looking at the value dimensions, we've got various potential stakeholders that all might have a play in or an interest in the outcome of your change, of your transformation. Of course, and each of these will have a very different perspective of value. What constitutes value to a shareholder might be completely different and even opposed to the value that a customer might be hoping to get out of it, or that you might be hoping to deliver to your customers. Internal stakeholders, similarly, all your employees and your co-workers and your partners have their own perception of value and the efficiencies with which they can operate, and all of the rest of your ecosystems. So understanding that there are different and possibly competing value dimensions is very important to get that understood. How then do we articulate what value means to each of these people? Well, through a value map. And for each of those stakeholders, you might have a completely separate and well-defined value map. Value maps, we'll show you an example in a sec. Let's start with this concept of value dials, where you decompose value. So let's take an example of shareholders. They'd probably start at the highest level value to them. The ultimate value would be profit. How do you break down profit? Well, profit is constitutes out of revenue and expenses. And so you can keep breaking these things down. You can either increase your revenue, you can decrease your expenses. What does the revenue made up of? And break it down to come up with a little bit of a tree that decomposes that value. You get to the bottom level of your value dials, and then you can start looking at what are the things we can do to move the needle on that value dial. I'll show you that in a sec. You can then align your strategic objectives to your value dials. You align your business outcomes, the things that you're going to change to your business drivers, and you get this really nice map of making sure that everything that you're planning to do in your initiative, these are the uplifts and the enhancements to your offerings or to your value streams. All of these outcomes actually get mapped into business drivers tied to value dials, tied to strategic objectives, and there's clarity on exactly what the scope is and how it addresses value for each of the stakeholder segments. Moving on to the value proposition. This is then looking at the customer. Who's going to be getting this, the outcome of this offering? What are the customer segments, the personas, the Osterwalder's classic model of jobs to be done by each of those personas? What is it that they are looking to do, and how is your offering going to address their pains or their gains? And so by mapping all of these out and understanding what each of those potential customer segments are looking for in terms of value, you can align your offerings against the value that they're looking to get. So if it's a product-led growth, led innovation, absolutely you have to go down this path here, mapping that out, and that will bring you then to the enhancements of your offerings. If it's a business-led growth, a capability-led, not growth, innovation, then what you're really looking to do is you look at the way in which you deliver that value through your value streams. Value streams underpin customer journeys. So if you, again, for each persona, they would have, for each customer segment, there might be a different experience of how they're enjoying or what their responses are across that customer journey. You'd want to get those responses, overlay those responses onto your value streams, look at the underlying capabilities that underpin each stage in the value stream, and identify bottlenecks or opportunities for improvement against or uplift of these capabilities. And of course, as we already talked about, breaking that down into the people, process, information, and technology. So mapping out then and of course your user stories for those would fall out of here, similar to these. And then finally, so executing, then pushing those user stories through to the delivery teams, tracking the realization then of value as things unfold. We have things like OKRs, which Raj was just mentioning in his presentation, tying back to strategic objectives, the key results and what those measures will be, the benefits, the risks, and we have a concept of a value tree to help you calculate ROI, the business case, and to do the calculations of our return. So let's try and quickly unpack some of that. For each of the, so in these value dimensions, looking at it from the perspective of each of your segments, and here's just a few examples of some of those segments. But what does a value map for those stakeholders look like? Well, here's a great example. This is perhaps one of my favorite publicly available assets that Deloitte made available some time ago on the web. You can search up for it, Deloitte's Enterprise Value Map. Probably very difficult to read on my screen, but it's just exactly what I was talking about earlier, how shareholder value or profit is broken down into their definitions of value dial decomposition. You can see revenue breaking down into volume, price realization. You come all the way down, and that's the end of your value dials, where you've got things like cross-sell, upsell campaigns to increase and retain customers, which will drive more volume, which will drive more revenue, and so on up. So you break down all your value dials over here. And what I talked about earlier was the business drivers aligned to the value dials. What the business drivers are these are the types of thing that you can do, not necessarily the thing you will do, but what type of thing could you do to move the needle on that particular value dial. And these are great because you can see they've got them color-coded and heat mapped here on various dimensions. In this case, it's process groupings, but you could have any kind of heat mapping across these business drivers. And what we then do in our tool is we take these business drivers, say, right, so our initiative then has got some business outcomes. These are things we're going to try and do with our initiative. They address that business driver on that value dial, on that, and all the way up into that dimension for that shareholder. And you can have maps like this for every one of your different stakeholders. So what does it look like in a tool? This is exactly the Deloitte value map. In our tool, we've collapsed up, and we're only showing you the first few levels here. So a shareholder value tree, breaking it down into those 4 categories and then decomposing down and down to your lowest level value dials, exploding those out then across those value dials with all the business drivers. And then you can see associated with, what we've done there is gone into one of those value dials here, the marketing and sales one, to then look at these are the business drivers, and these are our business outcomes mapped to the business drivers. And these business outcomes, these are the ideas. These are the things that we found in that anatomy of innovation that's feeding into the backlog. These are the ideas that work their way through, and here's the stages that they're at as they make their way through the board, the Kanban board, until they get fed into the backlog for change. You can drill into any of those and get all the detail on any of those ideas. So that's a fantastic way then of mapping this all out. How do you tie that all back into your objectives and your strategies? So just back up, sorry, one quick look back up here. So the business outcomes of the initiative mapped into the value drivers and the business drivers, and then the business strategies or the transformation strategies and objectives mapped into the value dials, right? And so down here then, when we get into our plan for this particular initiative, we have we can define vision and mission for it. We can get the business objectives, and then we build business value maps showing for those objectives what the business drivers are that objectives map to, what the value drivers are, key, and then further down into key results, measurable, and the initiatives. So nice little map of what this particular initiative is delivering. On this side of the page, the actual initiative themselves and how they're laid out into a roadmap, and drill into those and get more detail on those. You can lay all your objectives out, and you can do all kinds of planning, 3-horizon planning in this case, across whatever dimensions you want. So you can move these things around and establish, you know, the greatest bang for the buck across one particular transformation. Could have multiple objectives. You can align these things into and use this to sort of prioritize which of these things are then going to give you the most bang for the buck across your dimensions. In this case, we're looking at impact and disruptive potential and value across 3 horizons, with color representing the prioritization of those things. Okay, so moving then on to the designing of the offerings for the value for your value propositions, starting obviously with the segments and personas. So representing here, who are your various segments? A very important thing that I don't know if organizations do this very well, but trying to identify and thinking through the potential buyers for your product, the buyer journeys, but they all start with who are the buyer personas and in those customer segments. Once you've got those customer segments defined, the value proposition canvas for each of those. So for every buyer you would have, or customer segment, in this case, the empty nesters, you would have a very different value proposition. And that could be both for an offering, like how the product you're selling them, but even for a service that you deliver, like the way in which you unfold an insurance claim for those particular segments. So I just wanted to put that little nuance in here when you do the value proposition canvas. This is our version of it. You can, if you're familiar with Osterwalder, you're not seeing the circle in the box. We've just laid things out slightly differently, but it's exactly the same thing. So what we're looking at here in a value proposition canvas is the left-hand side of the canvas here is talking about the persona, the empty nester, and it's their profile of that persona. So what Osterwalder calls the jobs to be done, we've labeled them as scenarios. What are the important things to that particular persona in the context of an insurance claim? You know, flexible policies and so on, whatever those might be. So workshopping these, dragging your post-it notes out, dropping them on, coming up with the value proposition with those scenarios, linking those then to needs for each of those scenarios. What are the corresponding needs? And you can have as many as you like here. We just got a little illustration of some, and that gives you a real nice map of this persona, what they need in an insurance claim versus perhaps any other. And then we move on this side over. So this is the demand, this is the supply, this is the offering. What then, to address those needs, what benefits can we offer? Drag those on and line up, come up with this will be what is pushing you towards your definitions of your new uplifts that you're about to make. And then out of your offerings, what are the enhancements to the offering that addresses that benefit? So the whole scope of your initiative for uplifting your product offering across this value, it pops out of this value stream, so this value proposition canvas, and is unique to that particular stakeholder, in this case, the empty nesters. Right, that's product-led growth. How do we do the same in a capability-driven growth? Capability-driven innovation, where we're trying to transform the way in which we deliver the offerings. Well, for that, we need to look at what we call the value stream. And the value stream, which is this dark colored bar here, underpins your customer journey, which is this row over here. So once again, looking at that same segment, we're talking about empty nesters, this persona. We've got the same journey for settling a claim. And what we've mapped into the customer journey above the line is the stages that customers go through in satisfying that journey, in settling a claim, contacting the insurer, submitting the claim, and so on. This canvas is called a service blueprint. The top half is the customer journey. The bottom half is the value stream, which is a business architecture standard construct. Across that customer journey, for every different persona or segment would have a different set of experiences. So we're looking at claim settlement journey for the empty nesters. If we were to bring up a different customer segment here, we'd see perhaps a different set of feedback up here. Now, your customer teams, they do this very well. There are plenty of tools that do this. They're probably, a lot of people still do these in PowerPoint decks, and they can get really elaborate and quite colorful and graphical. The challenge is always to go, what can I do about the information that I'm actually collecting here? Right? For example, in this scenario here, we can see quite a few indicators in this stage here that there's some problems around this particular group. There's a drop in satisfaction, and we can see some of the other indicators here. What the business needs to know is, what can we do about that? And this is where the brilliance of this canvas comes in, and a contribution of business architecture comes in, because we can now drop below the line here and say, that's happening. That problem is happening in this stage of our value stream. This is the inside out of how we support it. Outside in feedback from customers, inside out, what's the operating model that underpins this journey? We've got here a bunch of metrics and things that we can that are specific to this value stream. But most importantly, down below are the business capabilities, the key construct of business architecture, the capabilities, which come from the business capability map. But in this context, we've taken them out of those exact same capabilities from the capability map. We're looking at them through the lens of these value stream stages. And these capabilities, right, are the anchor for linking us out into the people, process, information, and technology. So the capability map, you can think of it as a scaffold for the operating model that all hangs off of this scaffold. And for every one of these things, there's a mapping to what's the application, what's the skill, and as you can see over here, we can drill through, bring up those applications, and visualize exactly what they are. We can look at, we can heat map these based on maturity, we can or performance. We can overlay onto these maps ideas. We can overlay pain points. We can, as transformation unfolds, we can create new those epics that are going to create uplifts to these capabilities. We can map the epics into these capabilities and visualize all of these things through a canvas such as this. I haven't obviously got all that interactivity in my slide here, and we've kept it simple for demonstration purposes here, but yeah, the tool allows you to do all of that. Right, finally tracking your value. Getting to the end then, as you go through the delivery of your change, you obviously have across all of the objectives that we set right up front, we're able to measure progress and feed that progress back, principally through the concept of OKRs, the key results that we're trying to achieve throughout the project, and how those align to the objectives. So here's an example then of a dashboard where we're able to take for a particular initiative, the objectives that we've set. For that particular objectives, the key results that we've aligned to that objective, and for that particular key result, then the measures that we've that are of how we're performing against that particular key result, bringing it all together into these interactive graphical visualizations here in dashboards for your transformation initiatives. Key part to measurement is obviously putting together the business case, and so the ability to then construct flexible templates for your business case, whatever they might be. Here's an example of one where we've got a little bit of background information about the initiative. We've got the identification of the stakeholders and what their roles are in the race here for this particular initiative, the benefits and the risks, the key results, and any information like budgets and costs. And finally, the ability to then bring to get all of that together into some financial calculations of contribution through the concept of value trees. Understanding the overall dimension of value could come actually from your value maps right from the start. How you then break that value dimension down into its component parts. And so in this case, improving revenue, reducing costs, and the things that you're doing to achieve each of those value drivers, and then across the measured periods, what your targets are for ROI across those, and then for tracking your measures against those. So a great way of aligning across each of the contributions within a value, within a transformation initiative, what the expected contribution is to the overall ROI that you're expecting from the initiative. So that's a quick run through the way that we approach value engineering, as we call it, across a transformation initiative. The thought I would just leave you with is when we're doing transformation, it's actually not about transforming at all, but building this capacity to continuously transform. And us as architects, this is exactly what our contribution to the whole transformation is, about putting in place the methods, the approaches, the tools, and the capabilities for people to be able to decompose and understand how to do transformation and how to continuously apply those things across these constructs that we're building for the organization. I'm going to stop there. Bryce, hand it back over. And
that was excellent, Terry. A great presentation. I'm actually awed at the detail that you've gone through in the tracing stuff. And I'm wondering, is there an opportunity, like it almost looks to me like, because you got that traceability, and I don't know the right wording, so forgive me if I get it wrong here, but it's almost like you could do a sensitivity analysis between the different, value outcomes that you're looking at. And if you had to prioritize them, you could say, well, there's, possibilities, this is it and that. And I guess what I'm really going to is, how would you prioritize them? And can you do something like that to look how things are affected from the drivers? Yeah.
Absolutely. Going back up to that, this value map up here, there's so many overlays that we could apply onto these things. Because once we've got a map like that established, right, these business drivers in particular, we can map these things to things like pain points that might be addressed by that particular driver, ideas that we have in our backlog that are approaching that contribute to them. We could quantify value that we think each of them might be contributing, and we could then do that sensitivity analysis that you're talking about by just running algorithms across the various numeric dimensions that we're making on these things to spit out the prioritized scope that would tell you, here's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you're trying to address that particular business objective.
No, that's really cool. And being able to really choose, I guess, between, like you brought up at the beginning, the two different areas, how you're going to deliver the value and then the business model side of it, right? I think that's really cool.
Yeah, we love this. We call these the anatomy series, and we do this across all kinds of different concepts. So this is the anatomy of innovation. We've got the anatomy of experience, the anatomy of transformation, the anatomy of your value stream and your operating model. And I think this gives people a really great way of just laying out the concepts and seeing how they all relate and what the dependencies are. So, and it really just makes it so much clearer as to what you're actually trying to do once you've got a perspective like this on a concept that's so abstract as innovation.
The other thing you mentioned was something about an ontological framework that you're using behind the scenes for this. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. And the reason I'm asking, it seems like when you're getting to this level of complexity, you got these visual things here, but underneath it with an ontology, it seems really powerful, right? And how are you using that? Can you do any inferences? Like, how far have you taken that?
So the whole application is built on this concept of an enterprise ontology, okay? And ontologies are really great ways, or knowledge graphs. Ontology and a knowledge graph, basically the same thing, right? Concept maps. These are really the best way that you can think of to support an architectural model. And the reason for that is that what a knowledge graph is doing is it's managing knowledge. And what we as architects are doing, we are engineering with knowledge. We're architecting with knowledge. We're connecting and wiring up knowledge. If you try to do create these bi-directional many-to-many relationships that you need to do to understand the complexity of a complex ecosystem like an organization, if you try to do that on a relational database, what you end up with is extremely brittle, complex join tables that are infinitely complex the more you try and go out. And there's a fantastic session just about 3 weeks ago, the keynote session at the Knowledge Graph Forum in New York. Bob Mueller, who's one of the gurus of relational technologies, talks about how they just why you need knowledge graphs for this type of thing. Okay, so a knowledge graph then is simply class related to class related to class related to class, and the relationships have semantic meaning, right? So what's happening as you're building an ontology is that you're putting meaning into these relationships, and this creates this web of connectedness, so that if I had a whole web, an ontology of knowledge and think of it just as a set of concepts over here that I've got attributes about them and I've got the relation. If I wire this up and I find a relationship between these two classes, then everything I know about this class is now accessible to everything I know about, say, this class or anything. And so I can change something here and I can go over here and see the ripple effect of it on this class over here. That's what an ontology does. So we've got that sitting at the back end of our platform. What our intellectual property is a map of all these business concepts into a knowledge graph. It sits at the back end. We run queries on that, pull the threads, pass the payloads up to our visualization. So you're getting real-time perspectives on the current state of all this knowledge, and we can wire that up out of our knowledge graph into third-party tools and query the state of attributes, say in Jira, to tell you what the heat map should be over here on the status of your initiative, for example, or ServiceNow or whatever else. One other thing, just to talk about the value of knowledge graphs. This chart here is fantastic. If you haven't seen this. This little visualization, which I can't claim credit for, I really love it. It's called the Knowledge Continuum, and why knowledge graphs are so great on ontologies. So basically, as you move up in defining the value of information and knowledge, right, you start really at the basic level with the concept of data. Data is just raw, unfiltered measures that come at you. I often think of the best way to explain how data is different from information is to think of the old modems where we had that screeching noise coming at us, right? You haven't got a clue what that is, but you know there's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, right? That's data. To understand that data, you need some sort of structure, right? You need the data model to tell you what that noise means. And that's in this world over here where you've got structure. This becomes information, and this is the world in which most of our IT systems operate today. We have data models, and they're relational, and they map out data into fields and tables, and we normalize these things for transaction processing, and we make it really efficient. We run logic and code across this stuff and it's all designed for computers to operate transactions effectively. It's not really great though for getting really good understanding of what the concepts in these data models are. So when we take those concepts that are in here and we add context to them by putting semantic relationships between those classes of thing, this is where we create the ontology. This is where we actually embed so much intelligence into the knowledge graph that's not there when you're just looking at a data model, that when you get to here, right, the great thing is you actually don't need any code anymore to run to interpret the knowledge from this data model, because all of that the logic has been embedded into the semantic meaning. So here, all you do is query it. You don't have complex business logic sitting in a compute layer, and so that then allows you to just ask questions of this knowledge graph through semantic query to get to your answers. And that is why ontologies have just so much value to add to knowledge.
It seems really powerful, and I'm wondering, when you brought this into larger enterprise sort of scenarios, like this must really shine like the power to come up with a whole, not just sort of one outcome, but multiple sort of like, here's options, here's things you can do. How well has it been received so far, Terry?
Well, we've been around for about 3 years now as a SaaS product. Prior to that, we were building it as a bootstrapping it as a services business, and we've got customers all around the world that are using it. We have, I think, what's to extend this. You touched on something that's really fundamental there, Bryce, which is there is just so much that you can do with a tool like this across so many different dimensions. So we've recently been positioned in Gartner's Magic Quadrant as a leader in enterprise architecture. But we think of enterprise architecture as just really one sliver of what we do. In fact, what we try to do is look at, we think architecture should not be the domain of a bunch of really clever guys in a dark room in IT. It needs to be what underpins things that are across the entire organization. For example, how you formulate strategy, how you explain the operating model, how you run transformation, innovation, experience government. These are things that are important to business stakeholders. And we as architects need to be talking this language, not the language of TOGAF and excuse me for that, but not the language that's our acronyms and so on, right? It needs to be something that's accessible and meaningful and interactive. And I'll get off my hobby horse with one more slide. This is our version, our sequel, as if you will, to the Knowledge Continuum, which is what I call the Insight Continuum. Okay, and it gets to the point that you made, that there is a whole continuum on maturity of where we as architects need to take our practice, starting from this stage of here. When we are just starting out with an architecture practice, we're very focused on technology. We're just trying to get a current state situation map of our IT portfolio. We're interested in things like catalogs and fact sheets and the data models, and when we're doing integration, we're about consolidating things. This is for architects. Most of the legacy tools, they do this very well. One of the first things they can start to do is application rationalization, and there they start looking at diagnosing stuff using heat maps and pain points and costs and risks and assessments, and this becomes really useful to IT management to optimize their IT. But the next stage here is where you need a knowledge graph. When you've gone from diagnostics to root cause analysis, these are looking at attributes, right? Here you heat map with attributes. You explore impacts with relationships. And this way you need multidimensional relationships to really get your cause and effect exploration. And this is where the modern EA tools are. Where we're going next, by this stage you can really do business architecture well. Next is scenario evaluation, and finally predictive AI sort of stuff. But you really need to have this foundation in place. I think our practice, we haven't yet got there, but this is where we're going.
Terry, that's awesome. You've just blown me away with a look at the future. Daryl, thanks for joining us.
No worries. Terry, that's a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much for doing that for us. And it just, as Bryce was saying, it's just incredibly impressive that we've got something that allows us to capture that end-to-end view of effectively innovation management in an organization. So wonderful to see. I was curious about sort of the extended implementation and what sort of conversations you're having with organizations and potentially other vendors in terms of tracking things from crowdsourcing innovation ideas and, if you like, sort of the process for getting those up and into a funnel, and then all the way through its life cycle to the point where it's over the lifetime of the implementation, it's being managed in terms of business impact. So how are you sort of looking at that whole thing?
Well, if you will allow me, I'll just jump in very quickly and perhaps try and show you that. I know this is perhaps going a bit beyond the opportunity you're giving me, but since you've asked, I'll bring up that service blueprint in a live version so that I can kind of try and answer that question for you, Daryl. So let me move this over to the screen here and zoom out slightly. So here's the canvas that I was just showing you a minute ago, where we're looking at this customer journey map. Right now, let's imagine we're looking across these capabilities here. We've done some maturity assessment of them. Let's look at the technology maturity across those, and maybe we want to explore out and have a look at, say, we can see we've got some technology issues. We want to look at the applications then that are underpinning those capabilities that might be the cause of those issues, and we can go a level further down, the second order relation from those applications, logical applications, to the actual physical systems that they might be, where if we wanted to then say, oh, now I can see I've got a system here that's supporting this capability that might be because I can drill through, go out to ServiceNow, bring back the detail on this particular system, and I have it all here. So imagine now we've got all this set up going down. I've gone down application, we've got our people, process, it's all wired up. Now, what we can do is we can say, okay, so we've got some technology problems here. We'd like to actually know, tell me more about those. Why are you giving me that bad score, Mr. Stakeholder? Tell me the pain points that you are feeling here. And so as they're creating their maturity assessment, they can give you that feedback on these pain points. And this is where the innovation part comes in. Right, now let's have a workshop and think about how we can address these pain points. So
did we just lose the feed there, Daryl?
I think we did. Terry's just frozen on us. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out whether it was my computer.
I'm going to try to remove him and bring him back, see if that works.
Yeah.
It's not, I think he just lost his network or something.
I think he may have. Yeah, that's one of the.
God, just that when the punchline was coming, I was getting really excited.
That's right. The joys of doing live events, eh? That's an impressive body of information that the tool is building up, isn't it? I see he's just left the studio, so he might try and rejoin, hopefully, in a couple of minutes, and we can find out what he was about to tell us, because it was very exciting. I certainly
hope so. I'm not going to, if I don't find out, I'm not going to sleep very well. This is pretty, to me, the future of business architecture, the whole idea that you can go through something, come up with really cool inferences, and not just sort of like, what are we going to do, but what's the optimal choice? What's the best choice? How do we face it? I see one of the comments, a cliffhanger. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got Star Wars beat here.
Yeah, hopefully Terry can figure out how to get back online and give us that answer. That's it is. He looks like he's making his way back here. Yeah, Terry.
Sorry,
it's okay.
Something's horribly wrong. I lost my internet connection.
That's all right.
We were all saying a cliffhanger. We're waiting to hear the future, and it's just like cut off.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's just. I can't remember. I don't quite know where I was up to, but I'll hopefully bring it back up. So, can you help me? Where had I got to? Well, let me. Okay, I think I'd probably given you some heat mapping on some technologies, and I'd shown you a few bits and pieces. And so I was saying we could, as we capture those maturity assessments, we could capture pain points from the business stakeholders to say, what's the cause of these maturity issues that you're seeing here, right? Then I was going to talk about, so that was bringing us to the innovation idea. And Daryl, your question, how can we then bring innovation into this and track people's ideas, democratize ideas? So the point is, every business area which should eventually have a canvas like this, where they can interact with it constantly. And we could come in and we say, here's a pain point that the business is talking about. Customers are left hanging if they're unaware that they have an incomplete claim. We can have an idea about that. So we hit the idea button and anybody can have an idea. It's a democracy. Log your idea. We'll later on take care of whether it's a good idea or not, right? So log your idea, describe it, map it to a capability from all the capabilities, map it to a pain point. As those ideas then come in, they get cataloged into the tool. And we can immediately see that for all these given pain points, oh, here's a couple of ideas that we've got. Now, so we're collecting lots of ideas as we go. What do we do with them? So all these ideas are accessible to us here on an idea board, the next string over. So for this particular journey, claim settlement, we have a board full of ideas. And as we manage these ideas through their stages, from stage to stage, we can drill in and capture different types of information. I've got to click it right in the middle to bring it up and get a view of, in this case, we're in the develop proposal stage. So we're adding all the information about how we put the business case together, the scope in the teams and so on. Finally, when those ideas get through to the delivery backlog, they get picked up, we map them into, they become epics really. And we then log those epics in and we can see the roadmap of epics against the capabilities in that value stream. Well, I could go back to the value stream here and say, show me the epics against those capabilities. So, and actually epics, they are not in the current state. They would be in one of the phases of our dimension. So you can see we can go from the as is to the to be state here. And in this particular phase of the transformation, these are all the epics. And we can visualize the delivery. These could be coming from, say, Jira, where you've got them progressing through a series of stages, and all of those are visible and available to you right here in the board. You can see a particular epic drill through and pull up from Jira all the information about that epic, what sprint is it in and who's working on it and what are the user stories and so on. So from conception, have an idea, all the way to delivery, manage that through your canvas, and the people that own this board, own this journey, have all of that at their fingertips.
That's great, Terry. And I suppose also thinking about life beyond the execution of the change. So once it's in implementation, once it's live, once it's going through its normal sort of life cycle, tracking that from a financial perspective. Is there discussion around how to integrate with ERPs and such to actually track benefits realization?
Yeah, so that's a really great point. We are not yet as far as we'd like to be with that. I did touch briefly on the idea that you can build these, that's the wrong slide deck, you can build these value trees, which would then give you ways of mapping out your projected benefits across the various contributions from the initiative, contributions to the initiative, the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. You can quantify what you'd like to achieve from those. Now, the actual measures of have you achieved that, yes, that would come from some transactional system somewhere. How to get that in, how to match it all up and line it up, we haven't yet got to that level of sophistication, but absolutely important.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, something that that is sort of an opportunity, I guess, for people to. There's always that challenge of getting people to sort of put their name to something because they're worried about being measured afterwards, that it actually realizes that benefit, and we all know that there's a lot of complexity to deal with when you're implementing change. So just being able to provide some actual data and then provide that as a feedback loop for the organisation to learn from over time, I think it'd be a wonderful addition to what is a really impressive body of information that you're building up in the tool here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daryl. Appreciate it. There are places that we've anticipated certain measures to come in. So, for example, you can see here in this canvas, which is the service blueprint, you can say for this journey, which is claim settlement, we've got 3 different metrics. We're looking at first pass resolution rate, claim settlement time. You'll see those measured here. We can look at that perhaps in a gauge. So this type of information could be coming up in real time through an API to something that's giving you that feedback. And so you can choose your measure by stage and identify across, you get a measure across the whole value stream and then measure by stage. And that gives you the ability to see where the bottlenecks are across a particular journey, value stream.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the way this has flowed on so beautifully from the previous session with Raj. So I was going to actually ask him about the use of service blueprints, and there you have it in front of everybody. So that's wonderful. It's almost like it was scripted. It's fantastic. And just one last question, if I can, Terry, is there's a lot of information in here, but the point is that it's in the tool. And I know you're talking about the ability to use those semantic capabilities to pull the information out. But in change programs, particularly agile change programs, I've found it over the last few years to be really handy to have something that's constantly visible to everybody in the team or in the organization for that matter. So how do you get all of that really cool stuff and make it more broadly visible to everybody? So you get those corridor conversations where they wander by the service blueprints and go, what's all this about? And you can start to explain things to them.
Right. Daryl, are you kind of feeding me my prompts of Dorothy Dixon? We probably need to explain to people what that means. But yeah, thank you. That's a great lead-in question. So we have this concept across the board. So I'm in the tool here as a architect, as a model. I've got all access to all kinds of stuff, way more complex than perhaps your average business stakeholder might need. But across the board, we can take a snapshot of a particular visualization, and that means grab that thing and make it into something that we can then assemble into a dashboard. So the modelers would come in and have access to the full model workbench. The business stakeholders, they would just come into a dashboard, and each of these is a snapshot. So throughout the tool, you can be in any given place, take a snapshot of something, grab it, then it becomes completely interactive. You can position it, relay it out, create your dashboards, and these could be for every different stakeholder can have their own dashboards. You can create these to your heart's content and just publish them out to your individual users. You can have these for business transformation teams, for example, where they could go in and look at a full dashboard of their transformation, or you can have a particular business unit and they could have all the insights that they need for their business unit. But it's just giving them the views that they're still totally interactive. They can click through, they can get to all this content, they can get a live integration out into Jira, for example, and bring back views from Jira and see it here and help, but they're just tailored views that you're publishing out to that particular audience.